So if you've been here the last couple of weeks, you know we've been doing some work. We've been doing some soul work. We've been talking about things like forgiving people. We've been talking about things like, hey, helping a brother or sister out when you see them caught in a pattern of sin. We've been talking about repentance. We've been talking about some like heavy things. And the good news is that while those things were heavy, they are like healing at a soul level. And so when you get that stuff right, well, then it makes what we're talking about today even better. Because if we were on a roller coaster, we could say that the last couple of weeks were kind of like the, you know, and you're like, I feel gravity, I feel gravity. Well, today we get to go over the top of that hill and we get to go down a little bit and we get to have a lot of fun. And so we're going to be talking about like, man, what are we doing here at Soma? Like, why are we even in this building? And so we're going to be talking about some really, really fun things, because here's what I know and here's what I believe. When God starts to stir in a group of people, and they start practicing things like forgiveness, and they start practicing things like repentance, and they start restoring relationships, well, that's the seeds of revival. That is the seeds of renewal, because God says, let's take that goodness and start multiplying it. Now, before we dive into all of that, I got to tell you guys a story. Many years ago when I lived in San Diego, I was in this group of people, and we were listening to this talk from this leadership and performance coach. And he was talking about how he'd built his company during his 20s and 30s, and he'd been extremely successful. And somewhere in his like late 30s, early 40s, he had a doctor's appointment, and the doctor told him, if you don't find some hobbies, you will not live to see 60. And he's like, you hard charge on everything. You're going to have to find something outside of work that brings you some joy and some happiness. And so he picked two hobbies. One of them was like long distance motorcycle rides, and the other was competitive sailing. And I was like, of course, that's what you pick when because he's not going to go like, I don't know, crochet or something. He's like, so he picks something like, okay, he picks these two things, and he's telling us all about competitive sailing and how you can use islands, like on some of these races they have, if the islands are close enough, if you can split the difference, the wind that comes through them will actually give your sails a boost and you can pick up speed. But you got to be super careful, because if you get too close to either one, there's shallow rocks and it'll tear your boat and you'll sink. And I don't know the first thing about sailing, but I'm listening to all of this, and he's describing how he got all into competitive sailing. And so then as he would travel around the country, he'd always try to find out about what kind of sail scene there was. I mean, he was on the coast a lot, you know, you're not going to Kansas talking about what kind of sailing you got. But he's talking about that, and he's talking about when he goes to New England this one time, he finds this yacht club, and he's like researching the origins of it, because this is his passion now and it's his hobby. And he finds out this crazy thing. He finds out that the yacht club had started as this thing called a rescue society. See, it's New England, and they have these really bad winter storms, and they have these bad storms that will blow in off the coast. And there would be, obviously, there's a lot of shipping back in the day. I mean, there still is to this day. And occasionally, one of these boats would get caught on the rocks, caught on the shoals, and there would need to be a group of people that would go out and help rescue the people on the boat and rescue whatever cargo they could. And they formed these things called rescue societies, where they would start out, get together, like, hey, you got a boat, I got a boat. They would go out when the emergency came in, rescue what they could, come back, get a fire going, warm them up, give the people a hot meal. And it said over time, they really enjoyed the camaraderie and the purpose that they had together. They enjoyed the community that they built. They enjoyed the sense of getting to do something that mattered. But over time, what happened in this one particular yacht club is that they started loving hanging out with each other more than they loved the rescue part. And so gradually over time, the rescue society morphed into a yacht club where they're like, hey, let's get together, let's talk boats because that's our passion, let's eat some good food, let's hang out and have a good time, and then let's go home after we've sailed. Now, no offense against yacht clubs. In fact, if you are a part of a yacht club and we're not friends, you can come be my friend. But there's a real problem when a rescue society becomes a yacht club. And one of the things that I think is so dangerous in church world is that we are designed to be a rescue society. But so often we end up as a yacht club. Like God has given us this purpose. He even says, like, this is very near and dear to the heart of Jesus. In Luke 19:10, Jesus is talking to a group of people and he says, this was why I came. In Luke 19:10, he says, for the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost. This is his purpose, Jesus says. And this is the purpose that he's given us as the church as well. But so often, what started as a rescue society drifts into becoming a yacht club. And here's the deal. I don't actually think the reason is because most of you guys are bad or that I'm bad. Now, there's a small percentage of people that are just straight up jerks and they're like, no, I don't want anybody else to come here. You know, like there is that small, tiny percentage. But I think for most of the people, the way that we end up drifting towards a yacht club is that we look at ourselves and we say, you know what? I don't think I'm qualified to go rescue other people. Like, I don't think I have what it takes to go out and be somebody who brings somebody else in out of the dark, out of the cold. I don't know if I'm qualified to go out there and throw a lifeline. Like, what if I mess it up? What if I screw it up? I might actually make things worse. And so what I think happens is over time, just through inaction, we drift towards being a yacht club. But the good news is it's actually not that bad. There's actually not that much required of you. And to kind of show you what I'm talking about, we're going to go into a book in the Old Testament today called 2 Kings. Now, this takes place thousands of years ago. I have to warn you, the story's a little wild, okay? And so I'm going to need you to like withhold judgment until I can explain the story fully. But we're going to be in the book of 2 Kings starting at chapter 6. And in 2 Kings chapter 6, there's this crazy story that actually has a lot to teach us about what does it mean to be a rescue society. So 2 Kings chapter 6. Now, to set the stage, the reason it's called 2 Kings is way back in the day, they used to write everything on scrolls. And when they ran out of room on a scroll and they could no longer fit anything in, they would start a second scroll. And that's what happened with 2 Kings. They ran out of room and they're like, okay, well, we still got more to say. Well, we're going to call this first scroll 1 Kings. We're going to call the second scroll 2 Kings. And that's how we get the name 2 Kings. So 2 Kings chapter 6, we're going to look at this story that helps explain what does it mean to be a rescue society. Once again, I've already warned you that the story is wild and that you're going to withhold judgment until after, and I can explain some things. But pay attention to what's happening. Pay attention to the different characters in the story. So 2 Kings chapter 6, thousands of years ago, if the people act weird, it was a weird time. All right. 2 Kings chapter 6, starting at verse 24. This is what it says. It says, sometime later, Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, mobilized his entire army and marched up and laid siege to Samaria. There was a great famine in the city. The siege lasted so long that a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels of silver and a quarter of a cab of seed pods for 5 shekels. Now, that probably means absolutely nothing to you because it meant absolutely nothing to me either. And so I'm like, okay, I don't understand weights and measures of the Old Testament. I need to go know, like, what is this? What are we actually looking at here? So a couple things to pay attention to. First, it said the siege was so long, it's been going for so long that they were running out of food. Okay, and the reason we know that they're running out of food is that they're telling us how bad things would got. The first thing they said is that a donkey's head, which for a Jewish audience was completely unclean. You're not allowed to eat a donkey's head. You shouldn't eat a donkey's head at any point in time, but if you're Jewish, you absolutely cannot. But they're saying, hey, things have gotten so bad that a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels of silver. Now, a shekel was basically considered a day's wages. And so I did the math, and if you take just minimum wage and you multiply it out 8 hours a day and you do that for 80 days, a donkey's head was basically selling for $4,800. That's how desperate they were. And it says a quarter of a cab of seed pods. The best translation I can come up with that is like, think of like a can of peas. A can of peas was selling for $300. That's how desperate these people are. They are like out of food. Things are bad. Verse 26, let's continue. As the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried to him, "Help me, my lord the king." People are crying out to their leaders, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Verse 27. The king replied, if the Lord does not help you, where can I get help for you? From the threshing floor? From the winepress? Then he asked her, what's the matter? If this seems like whiplash, it absolutely is, okay? The king has no idea what to do. And he has one of those people come up and say, he's like, hey, I need help, I need help, I need help. And so he kind of freaks out for a moment. And he's like, okay, if God doesn't help us, what are we going to do? Like, do you want me to go to the threshing floor? There's no wheat there. There's no grain there. Do you want me to go to the wine press? There's no wine there anymore. We are out of food. We are out of drink. And then he kind of realizes that he's spiraling. And he's like, oh, deep breath. Then he asked her, what's the matter? You know, like if I were her, I'd be a little scared right now at this moment because he clearly doesn't know what's going on. Okay, forewarning, these next couple verses are crazy, and I have told you that they are crazy. And so please understand that I recognize the craziness of these verses. She answered, this woman said to me, give up your son so we may eat him today, and tomorrow we will eat my son. So we cooked my son and ate him. And the next day I said to her, give up your son so we may eat him. But she had hidden him. Verse 30. When the king heard the woman's words, he tore his robes. Now he's at his wit's end. As he went along the wall, the people looked, and they saw that under his robes he had sackcloth on his body. Let me explain that real quick. In the Old Testament days, and even sometime a little bit later, you would wear sackcloth as a way to show that you were grieving and mourning. Sometimes you might see someone put like a black armband on their arm today to let you know that like they're grieving the death of a loved one. This was a way of doing this. When the people saw that the king had sackcloth on, they're like, wow, he doesn't know what to do. He's as upset as we are. He has no solutions just like we don't. And so they were like, oh, this is bad. This is bad. Well, it gets worse. Verse 31. He says, may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if the head of Elisha, son of Shaphat, remains on his shoulders today. And if you're like, well, who's Elisha and what did he do? Okay, here's the thing. The king has no ideas. He doesn't know how to get out of this. He's mad and he's angry. Elisha is a prophet in that time, okay? A prophet that represented God. And the king is so mad that he's like, I want to take out my anger on God. But it's really hard to punish God. You ever tried it? Like, what are you going to do? Okay? And so he's like, well, you know what? Next best thing. Let me go find God's prophet, and I'll chop his head off. And at least I can tell everybody, well, it was Elisha's fault that we were in this mess. You know, he's looking to cast the blame on somebody else. He's looking to move the blame off of himself because he's probably thinking, wait a second, if I don't do something quickly, the people are going to look at me and say, you know what? Maybe if we get rid of the king, the army outside will let us live. Like maybe it'd be better to just surrender and get rid of our king than to have something else. So the king is trying to figure out, okay, don't want that to happen. Let me find somebody else to blame. Verse 32. Now Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. The king sent a messenger ahead, but before he arrived, Elisha said to the elders, don't you see how this murderer is sending someone to cut off my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door, hold it shut against him. It is not the sound of his messenger or his master's footsteps behind him. And while he was still talking to them, the messenger came down to them. So Elisha's no dummy. He's like, look, I know what's going on, and I kind of like my head, and I like my head being attached to my body. So when these people show up, shut the door and don't open the door. And then he says, and while he's talking, while he's having this discussion with the other people in his house, the king and the king's messengers show up. All right. The king said, this disaster is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer? Basically, the king's saying, look, holy man, this is God's fault. Why should I trust you? Why should I trust God any longer? Elisha replied, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord says. About this time tomorrow, a seah of the finest flour, which is about 7 pounds. Once again, I had to look all this stuff up. About 7 pounds of the finest flour will sell for a shekel, or a day's wages, and 2 seahs, 14 pounds, of barley will sell for a day's wages at the gates of Samaria. Elisha basically says, hey, look, in 24 hours, this is all going away. In fact, we're going to have so much food that 7 pounds of the finest flour is going to go it's going to cost nothing. And 14 pounds of barley, you'll be able to get that for a day's wages. One of the king's people has questions. The officer on whom the king was leaning said to the man of God, look, even if the Lord should open the floodgates of the heavens, how could this happen? You will see it with your own eyes, answered Elisha, but you will not eat any of it. Okay, scene shift. Elisha and the king talking about it on this part of the town. We are now going to move over to outside the city gates and find 4 lepers, okay? So we are shifting scenes, same story, just now new group of characters. All right, verse 3. Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. They said to each other, why stay here until we die? If we say we'll go into the city, well, the famine is there and we're going to die. If we stay here, we will die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we'll live. If they kill us, then we'll die. So you have these 4 lepers that are outside the city gate because they're not allowed to go inside the city because they carry disease, and people said, no, you have to stay away from us. And they're kind of stuck in no man's land. They can't go back in the city, and even if they did, they're probably going to die there. If they stay right where they are, they're definitely going to die either of starvation, or if the army decides to come and invade, they're outside the city gates. They're the first ones that are going to get hurt. And so they say, you know what? Let's take matters into our own hands. Let's not just sit here and do nothing. Let's go to the other army, throw ourselves at their feet, beg for mercy. Maybe they'll take us prisoners, and then maybe we'll live. And even if they don't, it's not like anything good was going to happen staying here. And so, verse 5, at dusk, they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there. For the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army, so that they said to one another, look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittite and Egyptian kings to attack us. So apparently what happened is where the army, the invading army was at, God sends the sound of noise to them. Sounds like a huge army's coming. They freak out and run away because they think Israel had sent some undercover operatives past enemy lines and went to talk to the Egyptian king and the Hittite king and said, hey, come rescue us, we'll give you money, something like that. And so the entire army freaks out and thinks that they're being attacked, and then they just flee. Verse 7, so they got up and fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. Verse 8, the men who had leprosy reached the edges of the camp, entered one of the tents, and ate and drank. Then they took silver and gold and clothes and went off and hid them. Then they returned and entered another tent and took some things from it and hid them as well as also. They have just hit the mother lode, okay? The army ran away, left all of their stuff, and they're like, man, we were hungry, we were thirsty, and there is so much food here, there is so much to drink here. Apparently they ran in such a crazy state that they just left everything behind. So there's some gold here, there's some silver, there's some valuable, weapons and jewels, and there's some clothes and stuff. And so they go and take and hid that, and then they come back, and man, they are living it up. Verse 9, then they said to each other, what we're doing is not right. This is a day of good news, and we're keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let's go at once and report this to the royal palace. All right, I kind of have to give it up for the lepers here, because they're probably a lot nicer than I would have been. Because they were forced to be outside the city gates when there's another army that's there. And they're like, hey, you know what? Here's the deal. We're enjoying all of this for ourselves. But we know back home, there are people that are starving. There are people that have nothing. And if we just stay here and don't go say anything, eventually somebody else besides us is going to find out that this camp has been abandoned. And then they're going to be like, dude, you knew we were starving, man. Why didn't you say something earlier? And so they're like, hey, it's not right for us just to stay here and keep all this good for ourselves. And so they're like, you know what? We're going to go back and we're going to tell everybody what's going on. Verse 10. So they went out and called to the city gatekeepers and told them. So literally they go back to the city and they have to yell, hey guys, guess what? And they told them, we went to the Aramean camp and no one was there. Not a sound of anyone. Only tethered horses and donkeys and the tents just as they were. The gatekeepers, they started a game of telephone and they shouted the news, and then it goes on, and then it was reported within the palace. Verse 12. The king got up in the night and said to his officers, so they had to go wake up the king. At this point, it's the middle of the night. And he said to his officers, I'll tell you what's going on here. I'll tell you what the Arameans have done to us. They know we're starving, so they have left the camp to hide in the countryside, thinking they will surely come out, and then we'll take them alive and get into the city. The king is suspicious. He's like, I don't buy that this is actually happening. What I think is happening is they want us to all go out there, they can capture us, and then they get both the city and the people, and then they have two for the price of one. One of the officers, verse 13, one of the officers answered, have some men take 5 of the horses that are left in the city. Their plight will be like that of all the Israelites left here. Yes, they will only be like all of these Israelites who are doomed. So let's send them to find out what happened. Basically, one of the officers is like, hey, look, we can send some people out to investigate, and it costs us nothing. Because if we stay here, we're all going to die. And if they go out and it is some kind of trap and they die, that's pretty much the same either way. So let's at least investigate this to see if maybe something's up. Verse 14. So they selected 2 chariots with their horses, and the king sent them after the Aramean army. He commanded the drivers, go and find out what has happened. They followed them as far as the Jordan, which was a river. So basically they followed the fleeing army as far as the river, the big river. And they found the whole road strewn with the clothing and equipment the Arameans had thrown away in their headlong flight. Basically, it's like, hey, we don't even have to guess which way the army went. They ran so fast and so hard that as they started to get tired, they're like, I can't afford to be slowed down. So they dropped their weapons. They dropped anything that was holding them back. They hit the river and they crossed the river. And at this point, the soldiers that are investigating know, oh, okay, this isn't really a ruse. This isn't really a trap, because it takes a long time for an army to cross a river. And you can't cross back over it super quick. So if this is a trap, it's a really bad one, because we'll know about it way ahead of time. The next verse. So the messengers returned and reported to the king. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. So a seah of the finest flour sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley sold for a shekel, just as the Lord had said. End of story. All right, now if you're like, cool story, Jeremy. It was weird, like you said. What on earth does that have to do with us being a rescue society? Like, you started this talking about we're a rescue society and we don't need to be a yacht club. What on earth did that story have to do with anything? Well, here's the deal. It's pretty simple. We're the lepers. We're the lepers. We think so often that we have to know and do so much to be a part of a rescue society. But in reality, we're just lepers that have found God's goodness, and then we go and share it with other people who need it. Like, there's nothing special. There's nothing that we have to get right, because God does all the work. And so what I want to do is I want to kind of pull some stuff out of this story, and I want to kind of show how this applies to us being a rescue society. The first thing I just kind of pull out from the story is this. The world is starving, and the answers it finds are horrific. Like, you don't have to look, in the story, it's quite obvious. They are quite literally starving, and they're resorting to horrible, horrible things to try to keep themselves going. But just look around our world today, guys. How many lonely people are there in our world? How many broken people? How many hurting people? How many people who do not have anyone in their corner? And what solutions do they find? Like, I don't need to tell you the stats about depression. I don't need to tell you the stats about self-harm. I don't need to tell you the stats about addiction. I don't need to tell you the stats about all of those things, because you know them. You see them. You see what people are trapped in. Guys, people are starving for affection and community and someone who cares, and they keep finding horrific ways to treat it, ways that just continue to hurt them. And so when we talk about being a rescue society, we take Jesus seriously when he said, we're not going to keep looking for people to blame. That's what happened in the story. The king just kept trying to find somebody to blame for the problem. He's like, it's going to be Elijah or Elisha this time. And that's what our world does. It says, you're suffering? Well, it's those people's over there's fault. But that's not the Jesus way, and it's not the way that we're going to be. Where everybody else is looking for someone to blame, we're looking for someone to invite. Jesus was the kind of person, it's crazy. Jesus uses the phrase, the Son of Man came, 3 times in Scripture. One of them we already looked at. The Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. A second time he says, the Son of Man came to give his life as a ransom for many. The third one, and this is what always blows people's minds, Jesus said, the Son of Man came eating and drinking. What? One of those does not match the others. The Son of Man came eating and drinking. The Son of Man came to build tables and invite people to have dinner with him at tables. And what we see over and over throughout the Gospels is Jesus saying, you can eat with me. You can have a seat at my table. This is who we are as a church. This is who we are when we talk about a rescue society, we are simply inviting people to share meals with us. Why? And this comes in the second thing I see from the story. God is a God of abundance, not scarcity. God is a God of abundance, not scarcity. In the story, everyone was starving and completely unaware of how much God had for them, just out of sight. And part of growing up spiritually is recognizing that things don't get worse when we share them with others. The things of God actually get better the more they're shared. See, sometimes we have this false idea in our mind that God's goodness is almost like a cake or a pie, and that you can only slice it so many times before it just completely collapses, and there's just not enough for everybody. But that's not true at all. God's love actually gets better the more it's multiplied. And I can give you a perfect illustration that you'll understand completely. If everybody in your house is fighting and at each other's throats, and no one likes each other, and one person starts being a peaceful person, that's a good thing. But let's say someone else in the family also starts being peaceful. You don't look at it and be like, oh man, now the peace got cut in half. You're like, actually, this is better. There are now 2 people that are peaceful. And if you add a third and a fourth and a fifth until the whole house is peaceful, at the moment the whole house becomes peaceful, you're not like, man, this was so much better when it was just me. No, you're like, oh, you know what? It's actually really nice for us not to all be trying to kill each other anymore. It's actually really nice that we're all actually getting along. The good things of God multiply when they are shared. And so one of the things that we are going to die on this hill as a church. We will keep sharing the good things of God because God is a God of abundance. God is a God who has more. And what I see from this story is you're like, yeah, but what do I do? How do I do this? And this comes to the next thing. God is moving behind the scenes in ways we can't see. God is moving behind the scenes in ways we can't see. God scared away that whole army in a way that was like, I don't know if he caused them all to have a mass hallucination. I don't know if he actually made the sounds. I don't know exactly how that worked. But God was working in a way that nobody in the town of Israel or in the village of Samaria could understand or see. And God is doing that all the time right now with people around you. You think, like, when we talk about being a rescue society, you're like, I don't know if I've got what it takes. It doesn't matter. God's the one that's doing the work. I was talking to one of the guys on our staff, Aaron. He's the loud one. And this was like a year ago, I think, or something like that. And he was telling me about this friend that he had, and they had some common business interests or something like that. And one day the friend just says to him, hey, I've been reading about this guy David who's in the Bible. Do you know anything about David? To which Aaron is like, I might. Don't know. Yeah, I might. Like, God was working in that man's life, and Aaron didn't have to do anything to make it happen. And God is constantly at work in people's lives around us. We're always like, sometimes we have this pressure on, we put on ourselves to think like, well, I've got to be able to explain like the Big Bang Theory and evolution and why there's so many crazy cults that also say Jesus' name, and like, who are you supposed to vote for in the next election? And also like, what's with all the thou shalts? And I'm like, I don't know how to answer a single one of those. And we put all this pressure on ourselves when instead it's like, no. God's at work. God's at work in ways that we can't see. And so then what's actually true is it's not up to us. Instead, what we're doing is we're simply joining in on the work God is already doing. Amen. God is already at work. The lepers were not special. Neither are we. We don't have to be special to do this. What they had was simply just the courage to go check something out. Hey, I want to go see if it's better over there than it is over here. And because of that, the whole city is saved. God is constantly at work, moving people's hearts, moving people's minds. We're simply the people that respond to what he's already doing. And so because of that, the pressure's off, guys, because here's the next thing that I see from the story. People are ready when they're ready. You can't force it. I used to think, the first couple times I read this story, I was a little... it's good. It's okay for pastors to say. I was kind of like mad at God. It's like, dude, you let those people starve when you could have acted at any time. And I had to read it a couple times, and then until I finally realized, I was like, wait a second. The king wasn't ready to receive good news until he was ready. Like for the longest time, he was very hostile to God, very hostile to Elisha, didn't want to have anything to do with him. And then finally, he's like, you know what? I'm going to go kill him. And Elisha's like, actually, there's a different way. So often people are not ready to receive something until they are. And here's the deal. You don't have to make them ready. You don't have to make them ready. And so you can't force, you cannot change a single person's life. I cannot change a single person's life. Sammy cannot change a single person's life. We can love people well. God can change people's lives. But once again, the pressure's off. If you are loving people well, if you are making space for them, if you are finding ways to invite them to your table, you're doing it. You don't have to have a single answer. You can say, I don't know, 1,000 times a day. And that is completely okay because it is God that does the work. We love, God changes. And so here's the other thing. As we're doing this, expect people to be cautious. Expect people to be cautious. In that story, the king was like, he had an Admiral Akbar moment. He's like, it's a trap. For those of you that didn't laugh, you're clearly not Star Wars fans, and you need to repent. And so, no, but the king had this moment where he's like, I don't trust what's going on. I don't trust what's happening. I need to verify it. And maybe that's you today. Maybe you're one of the people here and you're like, you know what? I got invited by a friend a couple weeks ago, and I think this is all a scam, but I'm just checking it out. Or maybe you're watching online and you're waiting for the aha moment. You're like, I knew it. You just wanted my money, didn't you? And so like, hey, if that's you, completely okay. Be as cautious as you like. Make sure we actually walk the talk. Make sure we actually do the things we say we're going to do. It's okay to be cautious. It's okay that you're like, I don't know. Because here's the deal. Love lasts the test of time. Everything else does not. Everything else eventually gives up, quits, or whatever. But love will last the test of time. And this leads me to the next thing that I think of when I see this story. God most often works through unremarkable people who have been marked by a remarkable God. Remember, guys, the lepers were the least special people in the story. The only reason people listened to them is because they had evidence of something different. Like the lepers did not come back up to the city and say, as one of the leading experts on military strategy and conflict, what I can tell you right now is that it's a good time to come on out. Like no one would have listened to them. They knew nothing about farming. They knew nothing about how to get food. What did they have? Evidence of something different in their life. Hey guys, you know how nobody has food? Look what we're carrying. Where did that come from? See, so often we think we have to have answers when in reality, all we have to do is be changed by God. One of the things that I love is sometimes I'll sneak out to the Connect counter after a service, and I think the Connect counter people kind of sometimes get mad because I don't actually help them. I just kind of watch what they do. And sometimes there's a lot of people coming, and they'll be like, and every now and then they'll be like, hey, Jeremy, why don't you take this one? But what I love going and observing is it's so common to see someone say, hey, I came here for the first time 4 weeks ago, but I want you to meet my friend. This is her first Sunday, or this is his first Sunday. And I just want them to experience what I've experienced. Like, we keep thinking that it takes so much knowledge, or it takes so much things. And in reality, I see that some of the best people at this are some of the people who know practically nothing. Like, I'll hear them talk, and I'll be like, no, you got that wrong. You got that wrong. Okay, you love Jesus, that's obvious, so we can deal with the rest of that later. Because what people have seen is, but there's something different about you now. There's something that has been changed by you, and you want your friend to experience it as well. See, one of the reasons I think that we drift into a yacht club instead of a rescue society is for so many of us, we forget what it was like to be rescued ourselves. We forget that there was a time when no one was in our corner, and until someone was. We forget about the time that we could not pay our bills until someone said, hey man, I got this for you. We forget about the time when we were completely alone, and then we found a friend who said, you can come with us. And over time, we drift into, not because we're bad people, but because we're like the lepers who found something good, and we forget to go back and tell others. We forget to say, hey, there's something out here for you too. And so the most beautiful thing you can do is let the good things that God is doing in your life be shared with someone else. Because there's always somebody who needs it. There's always someone who's going through something. And so if you're like, okay, Jeremy, I get the analogies from the story now. I mean, I was wondering where you were going with that story, but okay, it's starting to make sense. But now you're like, okay, but there's no army out there. So, like, what is it that I'm looking for exactly? Well, there's a couple things. I call them the 3 knots. I stole this from another pastor. This is not mine at all, but I liked it so much that I'm just going to claim credit for it. You look for 3 knots. You look for people who are not from here. Because people who are not from here usually don't have a lot of friends yet. They don't have a lot of connections. They don't have people that are in their corner yet. This literally fell in my lap a couple weeks ago. I took my son Axton to one of these school events in the evening, and he sees a friend of his that he knows, and they're like, oh, and they run over each other, and they start playing. And then there's that awkward moment where I'm standing next to some parents that I don't know, and everything in me just wants to look down at my phone and scroll, but apparently that's not why God put me on earth. And so I'm like, hey, how are you? What's your name? Like, people always think that pastors are really good at small talk. I'm not. Like, you want to get straight to the heart of the matter, and we'll talk and we'll solve problems all day. You want me to just kind of chit chat? I'm not great at it. So I'm like, hey, I was like, what's going on? What's your all's name? And the mom said, well, we moved here a couple months ago, and we're still trying to meet people. I'm not the smartest guy that's ever lived, but that's a pretty obvious one that's just kind of thrown into my lap, okay? People who are not from here often probably need someone in their corner. They need an invitation. You want to grab coffee? You want to go to lunch? My circle's doing this party later this month. You want an invitation? First, you look for people who are not from here. The second thing you look for is people who we're not ready for. And this can be good things. Hey, I was not ready for being a parent. Like, I read some books, and we had the room all like set up and decorated, but I was not ready for how tired I am and how like my life is completely upended. I mean, I love my child, but I was not ready for this. Or I was not ready for the stress of this new job. Like, I'm thankful for it. It's more money than I've ever made, but man, there's a lot going on here. I was not ready. There are so many people who in a season when they are not ready for, they would love somebody to come alongside them. Be like, oh yeah, I remember what it was like to not sleep for 2.5 years and always kind of be in a fog. I can't fix that for you, but let's talk. I can get you some extra coffee. Yeah, you're going to need it. Like, who do you know that's not ready for? They were not ready for. Maybe you don't know someone who's new. Maybe you don't know someone who's going through like a new season of life. But I know you're going to get this third one, and that's someone where it's not going well. It's not going well. They're walking through something really, really heavy. They're walking through something really unexpected, and it's painful, and it hurts. And unless you are living under a rock, you know someone who right now is going through a tough season in life. And that's where we get to show up. Once again, not with answers, but with presence. Like not I mean, you can bring physical presence, that's cool. I mean, like presence is like you're showing up for them. Not saying I can fix it all, but I'm here with you. And we're going to walk alongside you. See, these three things, not from here, not ready for, not going well, these people exist around us all day, every day. And as we build friendships and as we build relationships and as we invest in people, that's how the world changes. That's what we do. We say at Soma City that we want to be the best friend our city has ever known. That's not just simply like a cool phrase. It's the way the world changes. A guy named Caesar Kalinowski said, friendship isn't optional if we want to make disciples. It's essential. The gospel expands at the speed of relationship. The gospel only travels as fast as relationship does. And it travels along pathways of trust where people get to know each other. Well, people say, I believe that you'll show up for me. And because I believe you'll show up for me, I believe there might be a God that shows up for me. And that is how it changes. One friendship, one relationship at a time. And so I've got two questions for you. Who and what? Who and what? Who has God placed near me? What is the next space to invite them to? Who has God placed near me? What is the next space to invite them to? Maybe you need to invite them just over for coffee, and that's the first thing. Maybe it's dinner. Maybe it's young adult YA on Tuesday. Maybe it's Eden, like not tomorrow, but the next Monday. Maybe it's a Sunday service. Who do you need to invite them to? I want to kind of make this real for you. Because once again, you can be like, sure, Jeremy, you're a paid professional, okay? Like, well, what about real people? Well, let me bring up some real people on the stage real quick. If you guys would, please help me welcome to the stage Lori and Chelsea. Okay, so as they're coming up, let's set the stage a little bit. Lori, we go to a certain bank here as a church, and you're a teller at that bank, right?
Yes.
Correct, okay. And so you guys have known each other now for the last 2.5 years? Okay, perfect. So Chelsea, how did you come to Soma City? Like, how did you come here on a Sunday morning? How'd that happen?
So after knowing Lori for so many years, she had always been super nice to me, and we always had good conversation when she came in. And finally, at the beginning of this year, I told her a little bit about my background and how I was interested in going back to church. I hadn't been in a very long time, but I'm also not a morning person, so to have to get up early, I was like, this is my only day I can sleep in, but
well, thanks for being here at 10:30. Yeah.
Thank you. And that's what Lori told me. She goes, well, we have a 12 o'clock service. And she said, but we also have an event coming up next week called Eden. Like, why don't you come with me? Like, I'll sit with you, take my number. And I decided to go because I had her and her support to be there with me.
Okay, so but what made you decide though? Like, what was going on that you're like, yeah, sure, I'll go with this random bank lady customer?
Yeah, I've just been going through. Sorry.
No, I cry all the time. People are used to it, so yeah.
Yeah. I'd been going through a lot. Just the past couple of years, I was not happy with my living situation, and I was diagnosed with MS in the past few years, and I was just really unhappy. And I just knew Like, I could just feel God being like, it's time, like, to come back. And I just knew that I needed to make a change in my life so I could get there, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Lori, from your side, like, what were you noticing, or what was going on that made you invite Chelsea?
Yeah. So every time I would go in, Chelsea is just such a warm and friendly person, and we would connect with our eyes, and I just felt like the prompting of the Spirit, but I could tell it wasn't time yet. Like, she would say, how are things going at the church? And because she knew I worked for a church, obviously. But so I thought, oh, God's working. Like, God's working. But every time I would go in, I would pray, and it was always not yet, not yet, not yet. And then that one day when you shared more, I'm like, okay, Eden's this week. I'm going to invite her. Now's the time.
Okay, so that was last March, right? So like 6 months ago-ish. Okay. Tell me a little bit about what's been going on in your world since March.
Eden really made a difference in my life. It really pulled me in, and so I started coming to church, and every week I was like, I could sleep in and I could just watch online, but I would get myself out of bed every week. I'd be like, no, like, I have to go. I want to be there. And I've made changes in my life. I got out of my living situation. My mom said, Chelsea, you don't cry all the time. And I was able to come off not all, but most of my anxiety and depression medicine. And I had a coworker tell me, just this morning she came and she said that she had seen a change in me the last 6 months, and another one said, you seem so much lighter, and it's really made a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. Guys, give them a round of applause for sure. Thank you. Man. Look, I cannot promise you that all things get fixed immediately. Like, obviously, there's some amazing things in that story. But it also shows the power of relationship, the power of an invitation, the power of seeing someone and saying, will you come with me? And maybe you're in the room today, or maybe you're watching online and you're like, yeah, I see myself in that story. Well, let me tell you, this is why we do what we do. Like, you're the reason for all of this. Jesus died to make space for you. We'll do the same. Like, I know it's 10:30 and I know this room is full. We will keep finding ways to make spaces. We'll keep asking people to move to the 8:45 or the noon. And when that stops being a solution, we'll find some other place to meet, or we'll blow up the stage, or we'll do standing room only, or we will keep doing stuff to make space for you. Because this is not like, let me speak on behalf of Soma City. And Sammy told me that I could do this. So you're going to be like, what are you doing? Like, this is not just simply a strategy. This is who we are. Like, we will die on this hill, that people matter to God, and that we will do whatever it takes to make space for them. So we're going to keep inviting. We're going to keep looking out for people. We're going to keep saying, you belong here. Not because we've got the answers, but because we're lepers just like you. We are beggars who have found food, and we are telling you where you can come find food too. And so if you're in the room today, and you're like, I want to believe so bad, today's your invitation. We have made space for you. If you're online and you're like, I don't know if I could actually come and show up, because if I walked in there, my presence would probably burn the building down. Let me tell you the stories of some of our staff members, okay? Like, we all have a past. We all have things. Like, you are welcome here.